The universe is 13.8 billion years old. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, and in all of that incomprehensible vastness, in all of that time and space, we have found exactly one planet with intelligent life on it. This one, in 1950, physicist Enrico Fermi sat down to lunch with colleagues at Los Alamos and asked a question so simple it stopped the conversation cold. They had been discussing UFOs and alien civilizations. Fermi listened. Then he looked up and said, "Where is everybody?" Nobody had an answer. 75 years later, we still don't. But a team of scientists published a new framework that may finally explain the silence, and the answer is deeply uncomfortable, not because it's about aliens, but because it's about us. Think about what the numbers actually say. Our galaxy alone contains somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars. Scientists now estimate that at least 25% of them host Earth-sized planets in potentially habitable zones. Even if only a tiny fraction of those ever developed intelligent life, even if only 1 in a million, that still leaves hundreds of thousands of civilizations that should have emerged long before humans ever existed. Given enough time, even slow-moving civilizations could cross the galaxy. The math suggests we should have been visited. We should have seen evidence. We should have heard something. The silence isn't just strange, it's a screaming contradiction, and that contradiction has a name. Scientists call it the Fermi paradox. But here's where it gets really interesting. For decades, the leading explanation was what's called the Great Filter. The idea, first proposed by economist Robin Hanson, goes like this. Somewhere between the emergence of life and the colonization of the stars, there is a wall. A barrier so formidable that virtually no civilization clears it. The question that haunts every scientist who works on this problem is, where is that wall? Is it behind us, some improbable step in our past, like the leap from single cells to complex life, that we somehow already survived? Or is it ahead of us, waiting? Because if it's ahead, that means every civilization that ever existed in this galaxy is gone, and we're next. Most researchers assume the filter was a single catastrophic event, a war, a pandemic, an asteroid, something that comes from outside and ends everything. But in 2022, researchers Michael Wong at the Carnegie Institution for Science and Stuart Bartlett at Caltech proposed something far more unsettling. The filter isn't external. It's built into the very nature of how civilizations grow. Here's the core of their argument. Think about how cities scale. As a city grows, it doesn't just get bigger, it gets exponentially more complex. The number of social connections, the amount of energy consumed, the pace of innovation, all of these grow faster than the population itself. Scientists call this superlinear scaling. A city twice as big doesn't just need twice the infrastructure, it needs more than twice the infrastructure. And the pace of everything, transactions, decisions, crises, accelerates accordingly. Now scale that up. Apply it to an entire planet-spanning civilization. What you get is what Wong and Bartlett call asymptotic burnout, a point where the demands of growth outpace the capacity to innovate fast enough to meet them. Crisis after crisis arrives faster than solutions can be developed. The system doesn't fail from one catastrophe, it fails because the interval between catastrophes shrinks to zero. And here's what that means for the Fermi paradox. If this dynamic is universal, if every sufficiently advanced civilization follows the same mathematical trajectory, then the Great Filter isn't a single event. It's a wall every civilization eventually runs into. Not because they're unlucky, but because growth itself, unchecked, is the trap. But there's something most people don't realize about this theory. Wong and Bartlett didn't just describe collapse. They described an escape hatch. They call it homeostatic awakening. The idea is that a civilization, if it develops the capacity to understand its own trajectory, has a narrow window, a window in which it can consciously choose to stop optimizing for growth and start optimizing for stability. Not collapse, not retreat, but a deliberate reorientation toward long-term survival over short-term expansion. The civilizations that find that window survive. The ones that don't burn out and go silent. Either way, from our vantage point, the result looks the same: silence. Consider what that implies. The galaxy may not be empty. It may be full of civilizations that chose to go quiet. Civilizations that pulled back from the edge of burnout, entered a steady state, and became by design nearly impossible to detect. Not dead, hidden, not destroyed, transformed. And this is where it gets personal, because when you look at Earth right now, at the pace of technological change, the acceleration of global complexity, the shortening intervals between crises, the theory stops being abstract. Wang and Bartlett point to what they call mini awakenings in human history: the banning of chemicals that were destroying the ozone layer, the de-escalation of nuclear arsenals after the Cold War, moments where humanity recognized a self-destructive trajectory and course-corrected. These, they argue, are early signals, proof that the capacity for homeostatic awakening exists in us. The question is whether we'll reach it before we reach the burnout threshold. Scientists who study this framework are careful about what they claim. They don't say collapse is inevitable. They don't say we're doomed. What they do say is that the window for change is finite, that every civilization gets exactly one shot at recognizing what it's doing to itself in time to change, and that the universe, that vast 13.8 billion-year-old universe full of 2 trillion galaxies, may have already conducted this experiment billions of times. The results are written in the silence. We might be witnessing the most important question in the history of science play out in real time, not in a laboratory, not in a telescope, but in the choices that human civilization makes over the next century. The Fermi paradox, in this light, isn't really a question about aliens. It's a question about us. Whether we're smart enough to hear the warning written into the silence of the cosmos, and whether we're brave enough to act on it. Fermi asked where everybody was. Wang and Bartlett may have finally answered him. The frightening part isn't that civilizations destroy themselves. The frightening part is how familiar the mechanism sounds. Here's what I want to know from you. Do you think the Great Filter is something humanity has already passed, or something still ahead of us? And do you think we'd recognize it in time to change course? The comments section is full of people who think hard about this. I want to hear your theory. The universe is silent. Whether that silence is a warning or a memorial, that part is still up to us.